Remember, I watched you play. You could really hit the ball, but you're a big hit tonight. That jersey is special. I was really glad to see that jersey. Congratulations. It's an honor for me to do Gary's bio this evening, and I'd like to welcome Gary's family: Sharon, daughter Alexis, Stephen and Carlton, and her brother Archie, his brother Archie, and the extended family. There's a lot of them here tonight, and rightfully so. I'm going to do Gary as a builder because you can't go and drive through Waterford without seeing some part of Gary's legacy. So I thought I would do him as a builder first because he's inducted here as an athlete. He was an amazing athlete, and his building was amazing too, but we'll start with his building. He took a very funny path to becoming recreation director in Waterford. He started in 1974 in that job, but he actually got his experience in recreation as a bus driver. I know you think that's kind of funny, how you get experience in recreation as a bus driver, but in 1970, 12 of us formed a corporation and applied for federal money, provincial money. And yeah, I was doing it in 1970, Bruce. and there's more to that story. But anyhow, we got a grant to run a comprehensive recreation program. It was Opportunities for Youth, OFY. And we had myself, Gary, Ambrose, Billy was there, Joanne Connors then, Kathy Timmons. We had all kinds of people who went on to do pretty good things. And we're the only school in the province, we're the only region in the province or town in the province to have every gym open in the summer. This is 1970s, we were way ahead of our time. We had tot lots, we had arts and crafts, we even had drama. Can you imagine drama in Waterford? Anyhow, we had day camps. But Gary's job as a bus driver happened because I decided we were going to buy a bus. I had $1,000 in our budget for a bus, so we bought a bus from Jack Ty through Jerry Marsh for $25. So now we had $975 to fix that bus. And we went up to a guy I met who kept me going through college with my car. Scotchtown people would know him, Alec Chopik, one of the finest gentlemen I ever met, really. And he was so good to me, and we went up, and Gary and I were there, and Ambrose, and he's looking at this thing, and he's mentioning all these things, and I said, it doesn't matter, Alec, tell me what's wrong with it and how much it would cost to fix it, and when we can have it. So anyhow, Gary became the bus driver, and Gary went on, because he was the oldest. He was a year and a half, almost 2 years older than me, and none of us could even drive a car. We were driving them, but we couldn't drive them. So we had to trust somebody that was responsible to drive the car, or the bus, and so it was Gary. So we had day trips, mostly to Lewisburg, but other places. We'd fire a couple of supervisors on with Gary, he'd call, and we'd all laugh, and he'd be gone. But there was no cell phones either in those days, but he'd call somehow, however he called us, I don't know. But every third day, that bus was broken down. And I'd go up and pick up Alec Chopik up and take him to wherever Gary was. And Gary was so patient, and little did we know at the time that Gary would become our first recreation director. Because in 1974, Dr. Nathan was mayor, I think, and Jerry Marsh was a mover and shaker in the recreation field. He really was. He never really got enough credit during his life for that kind of thing. He was all about making New Waterford the best recreation and sports town in the province, and I think he succeeded. So I was on the committee, Carl was on the committee, a couple other guys on the committee. No wonder Gary got the job, right? And there was all kinds of applications because recreation directors were scarce. The only recreation director I knew was Jim Fox from Sydney. Remember him? He used to referee. He did our game in 1970 with Gary Burke. But anyhow, when Gary started, he developed a reputation that was across the province. And imagine coming from this poor community, his forte became recreation facility development and maintenance. And New Waterford, through Gary and Jerry Marsh and Dr. Nathan, went on a very ambitious program to develop recreation facilities. And get the Jerry Marsh Field, was all redone over. It was later named Jerry Marsh Field. It wasn't then. It was the old ballpark where the pros played. Colliery Lance Park, which is a beautiful park, was Dingwall dollars, I would think, at that time. And Dr. Lavin had a big part to play in that. It's the politics of the day. But there was all kinds of money. Bill Ellerbrook was a master horticulturist. It was amazing in the way, and you go there now, it's still beautiful. But I think that was Gary's favorite facility. It's hard to believe. You'd think it would be a ball field or a soccer field. But I'm pretty sure that was his favorite facility. And then we had the Tucker and Joe Burns fields, the Park Field, which is now rightfully named after Ray Bozo Steele, the Francis McKinnon Soccer Field, the walking track, the Waterford tennis courts, and 2 basketball courts in town. We even had our own recreation van. Can you imagine the foresight to purchase a van, to take 15 basketball players all over, or 15 baseball players, or whatever. It was even, could be Girl Guides, whatever, right? And Lloyd McLeod's here tonight, and we spent a lot of time on the van, eh, Lloyd? So really, we had the best recreation facilities per capita in the Maritimes, and it was through Gary's work. But Gary also found time to volunteer and coach, and was board member for various teams and organizations. And I know I'm not going to get it all, because I know I do miss things. But anyhow, he coached with me when we were very young. Like, I was actually old enough to be playing one year, and we coached Billy Burns and my brother Kenny and a group of guys. And the first year we coached them in midget. We lost 6-5 to Halifax after leading 5-0. I don't know what happened in that game, but anyhow, the next year we stuck with it, and we won the Maritime Juvenile Championship, which is 19 and under. And in that tournament, played in Halifax. There was a big protest because the team that we beat from Fredericton, I think it was, protested because we all had different uniforms on. So we had Giant uniforms, Dodger uniforms, Moosehead uniforms on, whatever we could get. It's true. And we didn't look that good, but these kids could play ball. They really could play ball. You didn't have to hide anybody. In fact, you know how you always have to hide 1 or 2 players? George, you know about that, eh? And the next year we lost in Bathurst. I was at St. FX. They picked me up. We went to Bathurst, and we lost in a thrilling 1-0 game after 3 rainouts against Philip Hadge, who later pitched for the national team. But we had a good ball team, and Gary was a big part of that program. He coached many Cobalt teams. He coached at UCCB, the men's soccer, and that's now CBU, as you know. And he was an outstanding basketball referee. I hate to even think that there could be an outstanding basketball referee. That just doesn't seem to be in my culture. But if there was, Gary was. I don't think Billy is, but Gary is. He's board of directors of Cobalt, and you all know Cobalt. We never thought Cobalt. We were dreaming. We thought that we could ever develop Cobalt to what it became. We had no idea what it was going to become and how it could become the fabric of this community. But Gary was a prime mover in that. He was on the board of directors of the Cape Breton Colonels major midget hockey team. Him and Jim Melvin and Joe, and he put a lot of time into that. And he was on the 1985 mission staff for the Canada Games. So that's significant. If you're selected to be on the mission staff, that means your peers in the province recognize you as a good leader. But it's really Gary's athletic accomplishments that set him apart and put him in this category. In a category with Donnie's good friend Donnie McCauley, George Hughes, Billy Burns, and of course Charlie Pyle. I played with Gary first. It was kind of weird. I played soccer 1 year. Gary was on a provincial Carl Marsh's first soccer championship at Mount Carmel, which was at the headmaster's A level. And at that time, A level was just over 300, so sometimes we fluctuated from A and B. We could have 298 in school or 304. If you had 304, you were playing A. Well, leave it to Carl. I remember watching those guys play, but Carl took that squad and they won the provincial championship, which was pretty good at the A level, better than pretty good. And then in 1966, Mount Carmel squad, which I happened to be on, won it also at the A level. But my soccer story was kind of weird because I always thought, who would be an idiot enough to play soccer on a dirt field? Like, it's bizarre. The fields were, people probably don't realize this, but the fields were rocks and boulders. And so they were out on the field for a couple of weeks doing all the physical stuff and training before the game started, and I was shooting baskets in the gym. I thought I was in heaven. Mr. Gillis would give me the ball, and I'd play by myself shooting baskets, and I thought I was in heaven. One day I went down to get the ball from him, and he said, no, you can't go in today. And I was devastated, right? I didn't know. He said, you're playing soccer. And I'm thinking, the dirt field, are you serious? 6'2", 145 pounds. And he says, you're playing soccer. And I say, no, I don't think so, sir. I really don't think so. He says, I got a great spot for you. He says, you can play center forward. You don't have to come back over half. Well, then he had my interest. But anyhow, Gary was the best player on that team. And I'm telling you, there was a lot of soccer players on that team. Dougie McSween was on that team. I don't know if there's anybody else here that was on that team. Jerry McDonald was our goaltender. I don't think they scored on Jerry until the last game of the year. Is that right, Jerry? Yeah. So, I mean, that was an awesome team. But if you know soccer, it's the forwards get the glory, but the halfbacks do the work. And Gary was the center halfback, and Henry Hawk Hogan was unbelievable, and they were just unbelievable. But anyhow, an interesting story was we're playing the pretty boys from Banquet. They all come in, and they get the varsity jackets on, and running around the field. And anyhow, they drove up on the field one day, and Marshall DeVoe was carrying the mail because we had a couple of buildings, as you know, intermediate and high school, and Marshall's gone from one school to the other with the mail, and the bus pulls in, and the bus driver gets off and says, "Where's the soccer field?" Marshall says, "You're on it." Well, you should have seen those guys running around before. You know how you used to run around half the field? Well, they were scared. George Fee and those guys, George. They were scared to death, and it was just amazing. We beat them 7-0 because they were afraid to move, but we beat them pretty bad in Antigonish. And you should have seen guys like Gary and Hogan play on the grass field. They were even better on the grass field. They were amazing soccer players. And Gary went on to play soccer as a primetime midfielder at Xavier College under Bucky Buchanan and Jack Porter. I played a season there. And he also played with the Trojans, the Waterford Trojans. In basketball, I think Gary kind of started that late. Graham Passerini could attest to this. There was a pile of us. Colonel McClellan would be one of them. Carl got us in the gym in grade 7. We used to go down every day to the Strand gym when grade 7. Rattler McPherson, remember that name? Battler McPherson used to take us in, and he really was not he's no Richie Spears, George Hughes. He just opened the door for us and was good natured to us and let us play. And a lot of good players came out of that. Very good players came out of that system. But Gary was off playing hockey, I think, then, and he wasn't into that. But when I played basketball, when I got on the basketball team, Gary was on the basketball team before me. And I guess wasn't called that in the state, but Gary would be more of a power forward. He'd be about 6'1" at the time. And we had a successful team. We won, in 1965, we won the Headmasters B Championship. After losing our best player. It was tragic. Best player was lost in a car accident, John Blair Hutchinson, in February. That was just before the playoffs. And then in 1966, we got 2 or 3 more students in school, and we played in for the provincial A finals against West Kings. And they were unreal. They had Steve Bezanson, who went on to star at Dell, and who was a 6'3" gazelle. They had Adrian Nettie, 6'4", 250 pounds. Our biggest guy was me, 6'2", and never went near the basket. They had Tim Howard, who was 6'7", and Gary and Philip were doing all the dirty work and mucking it up in there. And they beat us by 14 points in the first game. 2-game total points, stun series, but that's what it was in those days. And we came back the second game, and it was being broadcast back to the Valley. They were varsity up the yin yang. They were unbelievable. They came their own bus and had their varsity sweatsuits on and varsity. But anyhow, Clary Lang was coaching them, and it was broadcast on the radio back to the Valley. So after 5 minutes of the first quarter, we were up 14-0. And Clary Lang was going bananas on the sidelines. His jacket was off, his tie was off, and I'm saying to myself, who is this nutbear over there? Little did I know that in another 10 years I'd be that kind of a nutbear. But anyhow, they ended up beating us that game, but they had to work for it because 4 of our guys fouled out. I'm telling you right now, I'm not a word of lie, if Colonel McClellan was home, which he should have been, if he wasn't at West playing, or going to school out West, we would have beat them, because that's the kind of basketball players that Carl developed through that program in the Strand. So Gary played a couple of years at Xavier College, and in '69 we were small college champs, and 4 boys from the Waterford, myself, Davey McNeil, little Davey McNeil we used to call him, and Frank McKay, and I'm missing somebody, but anyhow, and Lawrence Singh from Sydney, my friend from Sydney, was the other guy on the starting lineup. Gary's strengths in basketball, he was a great rebounder. He could really jump. He was strong, athletic. I always played bigger than he really was. And he's a very good mid-range shooter, especially from the corner. And he also played several seasons with the Strands, because sometimes we could play when we were at Xavier College. We could still play with the Strands, and we used to enjoy those trips because there was a lot more than basketball going on in those trips. And Gary also played hockey under the legendary father Bob Day, who played, I think, goal at St. Vex. So Gary could play everything, but I still think his best game was baseball. And I'm almost 2 years younger than him, and Gary had a bad sports birthday. Y'all know what a bad sports birthday is. That's December or anywhere around there. A good sports birthday is January or after. But my first time I saw Gary, I'll never forget it. I was on the second team, the Little League. We were in Sydney, and it was big, as everybody had alluded to earlier. Little League was big. But I was in Sydney at this big field, Colby Field, I think it was, and it seemed like 1,000 people. But in the Waterford A team, which Gary was on, was playing this Sydney squad, and they were a powerful squad. But I remember there was a major protest. A guy, I wouldn't tell you who he was because he never became a very good ball player after that, but he was just a big kid, same as Little League. He was whacking in the middle of the park, but I don't know if it was Lanky Sampson or Jervy Fortune who was ever coaching. They brought the rule books out. The guy was using a 36-inch bat. So he got thrown out, but that's my first. Gary and I played for the Phillies, but I don't remember much of that, but I do remember this, that Gary had to be taken off the field because he had to get his ring cut off. He had a ring on when he was playing, and you got hit with the ball or something, and you know that's the worst thing you could possibly do. It swells up and had to get it cut off. But anyhow, the next time I remember Gary was when Carl Marsh, again, same names keep popping up as George would say, right? Carl Marsh and the great Sonny Lever would take us and started the midget baseball program, which was sponsored by Father Rankin at the parish, I think. So the church and the sports were integral, just like the Calvin Hall and sports were integral. But we started to practice then and learned a lot more about baseball under Carl and Sonny's tutelage. And then later on we played on a real good junior team, really good. And I was only 16, I think, when I was playing there. And Stevie Moschuk was coaching. And we were taking on Sydney, and they beat us in 9 games, best of 9 in the playoffs. But we were every bit as good as they were. They had the flashy Kenny Coffert and all those guys. But we had guys, we had to wake up for game time at 6 o'clock, and it was just, we were vagabonds, but we could all play. But there was one game, you've never heard of this one before, I bet. They had to call her off in the 7th inning because we ran out of balls. And here, the Sydney Panthers, Bill Smith, who I played for later, and Howie Bird, they were nice people, and I always couldn't figure out why they wouldn't give us some balls, because they had all the balls in the world. They said, Lowell, we were trying to make a point, we tried to get your community to support your team. So anyhow, after that, during that time, like, you'll never see this again. Gary and I, and Tony Burns, Billy Corbett, 4 or 5 times a week, we'd get a couple of balls, get somebody to hit them to us, and we work on our infield play. Like that, you'll never see that, where guys will go to the field by themselves and work on double plays, balls in the hole, balls to your left, bunt situations, all by ourselves with stuff that Carl taught us and probably my father would have taught us too, right? But Gary and I and Tommy ended up in Sydney playing for the Sydney Panthers under Bill Smith and Howie Burt, and legendary Eric Parsons was our coach. And Eric taught us how to compete. He was tough, hard-nosed guy, but a fair guy and a very great baseball player. We won the Nova Scotia title one year there. I could never tell you what year that was. And we went to Moncton to represent the province at the Nationals. And Gary, every tournament Gary ever played in, he did very well. He was one of the better players in the tournament. And then one year, in 1974, Freddie Condon put a team together with a bunch of vagabonds. I was in summer school, and Gary was here, and we brought some juniors up. We played, we won the Nova Scotia title. Bobby Gillis was the ace. I don't know, he won 2 or 3 games, and went out to North Battleford, Saskatchewan, and finished second Canadian senior tournament, but a team that never practiced together, or some guys didn't even know each other's names until we started playing. But they were all good ball players, and they were well coached, because Bernie could certainly coach it. That's another in the Waterford guy. That's another name that keeps popping up. But guys like Bobby Gillis and Dave McLean and Rico McCachran. But Gary, in the semifinal, Gary hit a home run against the home team. There's probably 4,000 people there. We're not the favorites. You could figure that out. And Gary hits a home run, and then a little while later he gets upended at the plate, breaks his leg. So we went down 4-1 in the final, and I really feel that if Gary would have been playing that game, because he was really hot. He had a couple of hits the game before, and so that really took the sting out of us. And then he went on in 1977. We were both members of the Sydney Sooners when we started the Nova Scotia Senior Baseball League, and we lost. We won the schedule. We used to fly Bobby Gillis in every week from Toronto, much to the chagrin of St. Peter's. And then we used to do some tricks. Bernie used to do some tricks. They'd bat 5 right-handers and then 4 left-handers, and then we'd have a left-hander playing first base. And when the left-handers come up, we'd switch the pitchers, and then just driving them crazy. The rivalry was just off the charts. I remember games there was 3,000 people in there, and everybody's going nuts. But we won the schedule, but we lost in the finals to Yarmouth and Keith Bridgehill, a junk pitcher type guy who could really drive you crazy, but he could pitch. But Gary was the best shortstop in that league, easy, and he was that for several years. And he was, his attributes as a ball player was, he was a slick fielder, he had great hands, he had a strong arm. He was tailor-made for the dirt skin diamonds, right? That's because he's big and rangy. And he could hit for power and average, and he never got cheated at the plate. One thing about Gary, he always got his swings. But there's nobody more competitive than Gary. And probably nobody more stubborn. He might be the most stubborn man I ever met. And I can remember one game in Sydney, we're in a big game, and I'm in center field, and he's playing shortstop, and he boots one, and it was rare, but he did. He booted one, and then he's cursing, and he's kicking the dirt, and this. Guys are flying all around the bases. The place is in pandemonium. I come in and get the ball in, and a couple runs scored, and we get them out at the end of that. We're coming off the field. Wow, you never heard. This woman in the stands, she gave him, I never heard a guy get a tongue lashing like this guy did. It was unbelievable. She was calling him everything under the sun. And I couldn't believe it. I had to get a little sneak peek of who it was. It was his Aunt Tiny. So I guess he paid for that one. And so now, but you know what? Gary was a great teammate. The boys from Sydney, they love Gary, because he was an outgoing personality. He played hard, but he partied just as hard. Eh? So they really liked Gary. He loved to sing and the sing-songs and the camaraderie when you play with guys that you thought were your enemies, and you end up playing with them, So then, and now they have the MVP of that league. It's named after Gary, so it's the Gary McDonald Award. So that tells you, like, there's been 3 shortstops in that league. I follow baseball pretty good. Gary was the first good shortstop in that league, and then there's Greg Marquis, who played from Dartmouth, and then there's a young kid, well, he's not young, Ian Lockhart from Kentful. They're the best 3 shortstops in that league in the last 35 years. Then Gary went to play with the Dodgers, and we hosted the Atlantic Senior Baseball Championships in 1991 without even being in the league. It was major baseball politics going on at the time, and we were on the right end of the baseball politics. So much to everybody's chagrin, the maritime teams and the Atlantic team in Newfoundland were all here, including the Sooners, and they weren't very happy about that. We picked up some guys from, we only had second choice on the players because the Sooners got first choice, but we picked up some real good players, Chet Boudreau, Barry Marchant, and they had real good, we had some good players here though, obviously, we wouldn't have tried that without that. And we almost won that, but again, Gary gets hurt in the game before the final. He gets a hard ground ball off the wrist, and he was out. And I thought we would have won that if we didn't lose him. So he had a lot of rough luck with like that kind of getting hurt and stuff like that. But he also was a very good softball player, although that wasn't his passion. He played with the Raiders, and he played with myself. I played 1 year with the Hawks. We won a provincial championship, and I think he played another year. But you know, as far as, I'm a little biased, as far as I'm concerned, he's one of the best all-around athletes that ever come out of this town, even though he's a friend of mine. He loved and respected the game. He played hard, and he had loads of talent, and he was a great teammate. So it's a special honor for me to call members of his family forward to receive this plaque signifying his induction into the Waterford and District Sports Hall of Fame, an honor which is greatly overdue. Thank you.